Good
Hello.
morning, Rabbi.
Hello, Rabbi.
Good morning. Right,
Hello,
good. It's working.
Rabbi.
Hi. It's working. Good. Right. Morning, all. Okay, let me just sort out my thing. So we're live on Facebook. We're going to share the screen. Hopefully, if it all goes to plan. Come on. There we go. Okay. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So, oh, Pam is here.
Yeah, I know. I'm not very well today, so
Oh,
I'll
no.
Oh,
Oh, well, we're glad you could.
could.
Glad you could join us, but sorry you're not well. Oh no.
Thank you. Julian's over with at Dana's because her dad's not very well, so he's over
Oh.
there.
no.
Michael's in London.
Oh, goodness me. Can you keep track of everyone?
Yeah, just about.
Oh no, I wish you were.
Thank you. So I thought I might as well come on. I've just got a cold, but it came on suddenly, and I just felt lousy, to be honest, this morning. But feel a bit better now.
oh, sorry you're not well.
Thank you.
Right.
I'll get better soon.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
1 second. Okay.
What's wrong with you, Pam?
I just woke up with a sore throat yesterday, and it's turned into a cold. I just felt so lousy.
Have you tested?
No, it's a cold. I've got a cold. It's like
There's so
I
much
normally
going
get.
around.
Yeah, I know.
Where's Julian? Is he all right?
Yeah, he's helping with her dad because she's not very well.
What's wrong with her?
I think she's got a cold as well. I'm not sure, to be honest. She's a bit under the weather.
Okay, let's start. We are live, so the whole world is seeing this. Iris, would you like to read?
Okay, hang on a moment. I get it big enough for me to read it.
Oh, yes, please.
Sarah dies at age 127 and is buried in the Machpelah cave in Hebron, which Abraham purchases from Ephron the Hittite for 400 shekels of silver. Abraham's servant Eliezer is sent, laden with gifts, to Haran to find a wife for Isaac. At the village well, Eliezer asks God for a sign. When the maidens come to the well, he will ask for some water to drink. The woman who will offer to give his camels to drink as well shall be the one destined for his master's son. Rebekah, the daughter of Abraham's nephew Bethuel, appears at the well and passes the test. Eliezer is invited to their home, where he repeats the story of the day's event. Sorry?
No, sorry, I'm just trying to share the Facebook. Carry on, sorry. We've got double. Ignore it.
Eliezer is invited to their home, where he repeats the story of the day's events. Rebekah returns with Eliezer to the land of Canaan, where they encounter Isaac praying in the field. Isaac marries Rebekah, loves her, and is comforted over the loss of his mother. Abraham takes a new wife, Keturah, Hagar, and fathers 6 additional sons, but Isaac is designated as his only heir. Abraham dies at age 175 and is buried beside Sarah by his 2 eldest sons, Isaac and Ishmael.
Okay, thank you very much. Right,
Is that the Hagar that he originally had with?
Yes, it's the one he sent away. Interesting, isn't it?
Right, okay. And we don't hear anything of his other 6 sons?
No, it seemed not.
Okay,
Yeah, no, it seems not. And it is the same Hagar, and she comes back on the scene, which is interesting, isn't it?
How do we know it is Hagar?
I think Rashi says it's not mentioned explicitly.
So it's just oral tradition.
I think so. Let me just look up. Oh, never mind. 1 second.
And if it is Hagar, why has she got a different name?
Good question.
It would be far simpler if they'd just said Hagar. He remarried Hagar.
Right.
Until we have to read.
Just looking it up. The Torah describes them separately. Some of the rabbis say that she was the same. Where does it come from? Let's see. So nothing said about her lineage. So Rashi says that she's Hagar. She was called Keturah because her Ketoret is incense, right? Yes, Ketoret Hasamim. She was called Keturah because her deeds were very pleasant like incense. So it says Rashi. From the day she left Avram, she wasn't with any other man. That's what Rashi says. The Targum Yonason, which is an Aramaic commentary, says that she was Hagar. Basically, she always held a place in the heart for him, even when she was away. Other commentators say no. According to others, she's a Cushite woman. That would have made her dark-skinned. Interesting topic. Some discussion. Which children he blessed, all kinds of things. And it's not today's topic, I'm afraid. It's all good questions. So Rashi seems to identify her as that. But not everyone agrees. Okay. But you're right, it's stated here in brackets. So anyway, right. Okay. Now, so how old's Avraham when Sarah dies? Does anyone notice?
127.
137.
No, that was Sarah.
Oh,
Sarah died at 127. Abraham was older than her, wasn't he?
175.
That was when he died.
When he died, yeah.
Right. So he's had two pretty major, what would you describe as his major life events until now? Like major things that involved a lot of, I don't know, trauma or
leaving his home and then
yeah, actually, I didn't even think of that one.
So Sodom and Gomorrah, that must have upset him.
Yeah.
His bris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was his biggest worry last week?
Oh,
That he wasn't gonna
killing
the binding of Isaac.
well, before that, right? The whole birth of Isaac, that he thought he wasn't gonna have a son with Sarah, right?
What
She was
rescuing
old.
what?
Right? She was old and they didn't have a child yet. Right? We said last week one reason we thought Eliezer had hesitated was because Avram had said that Eliezer, the Syrian, the Damascus, is going to be my heir. So he legitimately thought that he had a claim. Yes, we mentioned that. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So there's the birth of Isaac and the news, right? Let's have a look. We know this, right? I think we may have learned this before, right? Who wants to just read source number 1, then we'll just talk about it. Any volunteers?
then we'll rush.
I'll read it.
Go on, Pam.
Sarah said, Hashem has brought me laughter. Everyone who hears will laugh with me.
Right. Interestingly, that's translated slightly differently from usual, isn't it? How's it usually translated?
Is it laugh at?
Right. Why would you name the heir to the most important dynasty in Judaism after what is essentially taking the mickey? Right? So the usual understanding is Sarah said, oh, they're just going to laugh at me. But actually, I like this translation. I've not seen this before. I don't know what it's based on. It's a nice translation. They will laugh. Kol hashameya yitzchak li. They will laugh with me. Could mean that. They'll be happy for me. They'll rejoice. Right? You could understand that. So laughter. Laughter can be like, you know, making fun of someone, laughing at someone. It can be laughing with someone. So according to this, it's when she says "Tzachok asali elokim," she doesn't mean that God has made me a laughing stock. She means He's made me joyous. He's brought me joy. It's one interpretation. I like that actually. Right? So on the one hand, there's this big upheaval that's taken years and years and years, and finally they have a child, a ben liz kunav, a child of his old age. They sometimes use the phrase in modern, like if somebody has a bunch of kids and then, you know, they don't have kids for a few years and then they have a child in later life, unexpectedly, they'll call them a ben zakenim or ben zakunim, a child of their old age, right? That's what Adam says about Yitzhak. And then what happens next? Of course, in our week's Sedra, he gets asked to take him up a mountain, right? Who wants to read number 2 from last week? We read this last week, of course. Anyone?
Take
Go on,
your
Jeff.
son, your favourite one, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you.
Now we know there's lots of discussion, he didn't really, and whatever, it was a test and all the rest of it. But bottom line, this is very traumatic, right? And Avram doesn't dissent, he doesn't protest. They travel together. Only at the very last moment, God says, stop, right? How do you survive that kind of trauma? And of course, why is it called the binding of Isaac? Why is it called Akedat Yitzhak? We've learned this before. Anyone know the simple answer? Surely it was Avram's test. Go on, sorry, Beryl. Who was, you were saying, Beryl, was that you?
We strapped him to the.
No, it's not.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were saying, yeah. How old was Yitzhak when the Akedah took place?
About
In his
30.
30s.
37.
Well, I think he was 37. So if you're 37, your dad says, come on, I'm going to go and chop you into pieces. You're probably old enough to say, I'm sorry, Dad, but I'm not going along with this. The fact that Yitzhak went along with it, I did see a funny cartoon. You know, it says, and you know how it says, Avram says to him on the way, he says, God will show us the sacrifice, Yitzhak, right? And we say later on that's a clue that he intends him initially to be the sacrifice. He says, God will show us the sacrifice, which is you. So I did see a cartoon where Yitzhak says to Avram, I'm not going further until you put a comma in that sentence. Right? So some versions say he knew what was going on, he didn't know what was going on. Bottom line, be very traumatic. Okay, last week we talked about the Shalshelas note and the pause, right, and the hesitation. But I also did a lunch and learn on Tuesday, and I used the share from the previous year that we'd used here about the Akedah, and we talked about it, and we said, you know, nowadays you know enough about trauma to know that, you know, even, you know, it's a bit like if you know, I don't know, if you want to, I keep getting bombarded with all these videos on Facebook, all these like motivational people that have millions of followers, Jay Shetty and these kind of people. So be like a video about this guy, you know, decided to see if his wife is faithful. So he sends this like, you know, plum around to try to seduce her and whatever. And she proves her loyalty. And then afterwards he says, oh, it was all just a test. I paid him to come around. And she says, well, I still love you because, and like you're thinking, but surely this is all very traumatic. When you go through a kind of a test, it's very traumatic. So that would have been very traumatic. And then now, the Torah doesn't tell us explicitly. There was, of course, besides for the ram, who was, I suppose you could say, a victim of the Akedah, who was the other victim of the Akedah casualty?
The ram.
Yeah, besides the ram.
Ishmael.
No?
Sarah?
Yes, Sarah. Anyone? Right, last week's Sedra ends off with, this is the mountain where you proved your worth to me, and it says, I think it ends up talking about, I don't remember what it ends up with, Avram's other children and things like that. And this week's Sedra starts off with Sarah's passing. Right, we're not told explicitly. Here's what the Midrash says about Sarah's passing. You may have come across, I've heard two versions actually. This is one version. The other version is that the Satan, who we know likes to cause trouble, right? The Satan is not the devil with horns and a pitchfork, but it's rather an angel that basically tries to tempt us into naughty things, and we're supposed to resist. So the Satan showed Sarah a vision of Avram about to, this is what the one Midrash says, about to slaughter Yitzhak, and she was so shocked that she died. I know of a very sad story actually of a chap that years ago in Cardiff, his mum was in the old age home and he decided to surprise her for her birthday. She came over from France where he was living. She died of a heart attack pretty much, I think, the next day, and they said it was from shock. So awful, you know. So Sarah, in the shock, she dies of shock basically from this vision. Anyway, this is what the Midrash Rabbah says. Who would like to read this? It's a different version, but it's a similar idea. That she was the casualty. Go on.
Okay, I'll read it. When Isaac came to his mother, she said to him, "Where were you, my son?" He said to her, "Father took me up the mountain, took me down hills and took me up to a certain mountain. He built an altar, arranged the arrangement of wood, bound me upon it and took the knife to slaughter me. Had the angel not come and said to him, 'Abraham, Abraham,' Do not extend your hand to the lad. I would have already been slaughtered. When Sarah heard this, she screamed and did not manage to complete her cry until her soul departed.
So as Midrash, basically, she screamed in agony at the thought. Right? It's interesting. Avram's got no issue with following God's command, right? Sarah, the Jewish mother, can't even, it's unconscionable to her, even though it's not true. Well, I mean, it is true, right? She dies of pain, of, what do you call it? In agony at the thought. Anguish, yeah. So that's one midrash. And the other midrash says that similar thing. She died of shock at the whole thing. So we're not told that. I mean, this is classic, I don't know, what do they call it? Not mansplaining, not whitewashing, whatever the equivalent of whitewashing is for men. So the men all turn out okay, but unfortunately there is a victim, but the victim's a woman. Look, the Torah doesn't say that explicitly, it's a midrash, but it's an idea. So whatever the case, Sarah dies. So poor Avram.
What always has puzzled me is Abraham was quite willing to argue with God about the destruction of Sodom, but he doesn't say a dicky bird about going to sacrifice his son.
Right. Someone asked this question last week as well, and someone also said, how come Lot is more successful at saving at least one of the cities of Sodom than Avram is? Right? I don't have an answer, actually. I said I was going to go look into it because it's an interesting question. Why the completely different attitude? I mean, honestly, I've got a simple answer to you, but it's not really adequate. My simple answer is that it's human nature to overcompensate when you think you're biased. So when it comes to Sodom and Gomorrah, which is not his hometown, he starts thinking like a real, idealist and altruist. When it comes to his family, he overcompensates. I just made that up. But, I don't know if anyone remembers when Malcolm Rifkind was foreign secretary. People said, oh, you have a Jewish guy. You're not just a Jewish guy, but he's quite traditional and, he's quite proud. And other people were saying, he'll overcompensate because he won't want to be seen as being. So it's human nature to overcompensate when it's something close to you. But that's not an excuse for sacrificing your son. I will just remind everyone, although it's not strictly the topic of today, but it's important that the whole Akedah doesn't work if you see it as, Avram knew it was a test. God would never actually ask him to do that. Right? In fact, that's not how the story is told. The way the story is told is he's so keen to do what God tells him, the angel has to basically physically restrain him from doing it. Right? I've told the story before, I think. It says in the book of, I think it's Daniel, his three friends, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, that were thrown into the pit by Nebuchadnezzar, and they basically survived and they were miraculously rescued. And the Tanakh says that they put on, when they knew they were going to basically be thrown into this furnace, they put on their Shabbos clothes. They put on their best clothing to go and be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, to sanctify God's name. So in other words, as far as they were concerned, they were going to go and do whatever they had to do. As it happens, they were saved, but they didn't rely on that. They didn't go in there saying, well, we're not going to get dressed up because ultimately we're just going to go home again later. They treated it like a serious business. So the same thing with the Akedah. If we start saying, oh, Avram must have realized, makes no sense, right? The same God that just told you you're going to have offspring through Sarah is now telling you to kill that offspring, or it must be a trick. But then that defeats the whole kind of element of it. So we have to believe that Avram simply followed Hashem's commandment. So it's interesting, although he doesn't get criticized for that, and if anything, he gets lauded for it. And I did give a share, so the share I gave last week at Lunch Alone, we talked about the fact that actually the lesson, I think we learned this last year, the lesson from the Akedah is that this is basically a one-time thing. God says to Avram, I want to see if you understand that your son is not your son, he's really mine, and I can tell you what to do with him. And now that you understand that, I want you to know, I would never ask you to kill your son. And never again will I ask anyone to do that. And this basically gets preserved in history just as a lesson of trust in God. So that's one understanding.
Rabbi, was it in those days that child sacrifice was?
It certainly was. Yes, it wouldn't have been completely ridiculous to have suggested it, right? It was very much common. I don't know if anyone's I don't watch much TV. For some reason, occasionally watch things. I've stopped because you need a license now. Did anyone watch Troy? It was on the BBC. So anyway, I don't know if it's true, but in the story, basically at the end, they have to sacrifice this child to appease the gods. And they sacrifice this baby. It's horrible. It's just awful. It was quite normal, evidently, at the time. So, so it's all very tragic, right? Sarah has died, whether she died because of the Akedah, whatever. This is the woman who was his companion, who went, left his homeland and birthplace with him, who hid in a box, who pretended to be his sister, all these things. Right. So what would you expect from most people? A man of 137. He was old. Right, let's see what the Torah says about him. Number 4. Anyone want to read? Nice short source there.
Oh, Abraham was now old, advanced in years.
Right. And the rest of the verses that God blessed him. Now, some people say Baba Yomim, right? He was Zakein, he was old. Baba Yomim, he went through, means literally he came through the years. Some people say that means he used his time wisely. He was old. He's an old man. He's lost his wife and companion. What would you, he's been through all kinds of trauma. What would you think would happen next?
He'd descend into senility.
Yeah, right. He'll kind of withdraw. Enough is enough. I'm 137. I've lost my life partner. I've been through a lot of trauma. I want some peace and quiet. I'll spend the rest of my days, I don't know, as a couch potato. He's done what God asked him. He's been promised the land of Canaan 7 times. By the time Sarah dies, he has to buy a plot there. Right? Think about that. They haven't got the land yet. God has promised him many children, a great nation. He's only got one son, Isaac, who he almost lost. Isaac is unmarried at 37. Right? He's still hanging out with his dad. So things have not fallen into place exactly. He's lost his wife. He's had this weird experience where God told him to sacrifice his son. Son's not married yet, no grandchildren. And now he's got no life partner. So lots of reasons to be a bit fed up.
He might have felt that I'm really pleased now. I've got a little bit of time for myself. Or this is how it is. There's no point in my questioning it. I have no control. Therefore, I have to make do and mend.
Right. Let's see if Sally's right. So what happens next?
He marries Keturah.
Well, before that, who would like to read?
Okay, I'll read again.
Go on. Yeah.
Sarah dies in Kiriath Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead. That's all I've got.
From beside his dead.
Right. So we've got
Dead.
this. Right. So basically, he gets up from Shiva, quite literally.
Oh.
It's interesting, there's an idea, as I understand it, that as important as it is to sit Shiva, it's equally important to get up from Shiva. Getting up from Shiva is a part of the process. You've done your week of sitting on low chairs, covering your mirrors, and generally, having your torn clothing. And a person, occasionally, there's a chap, if you ever go to Bushy Cemetery, there's a chap, I think he's got a Rolls Royce or a Jag or something, I don't know. He has a chauffeur-driven car. He's obviously a man of means, and he comes every day. There's a bench. He donated a bench, and you see him quite near the entrance. He's a well-dressed chap. He comes and he sits, and I don't know if he says Tehillim or he sits and meditates by his wife's grave. Evidently, he lost his wife. I don't know when, but he still comes every day. That's what he does. Totally understandable. Not necessarily recommended, and that's one of the reasons that you'll find in halacha that you're not supposed to go to the grounds. I think it says during Shloshim, but generally you're not supposed to go a lot during the first year. It's to do, as I understand, with the psychology of grief. It's not a deep spiritual thing. It's the idea that people have to move on and they have to heal, and actually spending too much time at the grounds is not good. This is my understanding of the reason for that. So getting up from Shiva is very important. All right. I don't know if all rabbis do it. I don't always manage, but I tried to go around on the last morning. People are doing a proper week, and I basically formally invite them to get up from Shiva, and there's different customs to go for a walk around the block to move on to the next stage. And if a person would say, I want to keep the Shiva chair, I'm going to sit on this forever because I'm so devastated by the loss of my whoever it was, we would say, no, you've got to get up. You've got to move on to some degree. So Avram does that. If you look in the Hebrew, I mean, it says they mourned for Moshe 30 days, for Aaron 30 days, sorry. And meanwhile here, it says, Vayavo Avram came, Livkod L'Sara, to cry. Livkod is literally lispod, to give a hesped, to eulogize Sarah, but livkosa, and to cry, to bewail her. And then immediately, I'm not told the timescale for this, but Vayakam Avram got up, quite literally, rose up, Me'apane Mesai, and he gets on with it, basically. He moves on, right? He buys a plot of land for the Machpelah to bury Sarah. And the next thing he also does is he gets moving on finding a son for for Yitzchak. Right? What were the two blessings that Abram was given by God? You just mentioned them a little bit earlier.
Lots of children.
Yes.
And the land of Canaan.
And the land, right? So he buys some land, basically, settles the land, and also he wants grandchildren. I think I mentioned this last week. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Hebron. There are a few quite right-wing people there, but leaving aside the present-day politics of Hebron, it's the first city that was ever Jewish. Abram bought land there. In fact, I think Rashi says, why did he buy the land? Right? They describe him initially as what did we say last week? Right? Lot is laughed at by his family, but Abram is described as a prince of God. He's treated with great respect. I think Rashi says they would have offered him the land for nothing. They insisted on paying. Why did he insist on paying? Because he knew one day people say you stole the land from the Arabs. So he insisted on paying. He paid for it fair and square. Right? It's an important lesson, by the way. So Hebron was the first holy city. Yerushalayim comes later. Nowadays you say Hebron, it's an Arab city. What are Jews doing there? Okay, I mean, it might not be the most sensible place to live, but in historical terms, it was the first ever Jewish settlement, as far as I know, the land of Israel. First real estate purchase, anyway. So Abram, two things. He gets basically land in the land of Israel, which he does of his own initiative, and he gets he sets out to find a shidduch for Yitzchak. Right? And both of these things he does very much with what we call in Hebrew hishtadlot or hishtadlus. Right? Hishtadlus means putting in hishtadel means, like in modern Hebrew, people say, if you ask someone to do something, say, ani mishtadel, I'll try. Ani mishtadel, I'll try my best. So hishtadlot or hishtadlus means, people often talk about it, you want a shidduch, you have to do your hishtadlus. What's your hishtadlus? Your hishtadlus is that you should comb your hair and maybe take a shower, and get dressed nicely for a date, and maybe go meet a shadchan. My parents over the years are involved with students in Oxford. My father always tells the story of a Jewish lady that calls them and says, is this Mr. Wallenberg, doctor? He was the president of the shul at the time. Yes. My son's coming to Oxford and he's a very quiet boy. He doesn't put himself about very much. And please, can you arrange for him to meet some nice Jewish girls?
You can come earlier.
Because, we need him to meet a nice Jewish girl.
Yes, sure. Half an hour. Yeah, okay.
We need him to meet a nice Jewish girl. So my father, I think, said, maybe he needs to put himself out a bit more. Put himself about a bit. Anyway, so what does Avram do to overcome his trauma? He gets on with it. He moves on. He does something. And it's an interesting discussion. Yesterday, of course, was Remembrance Day. I think the first real recognition of trauma and post-traumatic stress, if I recall correctly, I think we learned this previously, was the Vietnam War. Does that sound right? The 60s and 70s. After World War I, World War II, people talked about shell shock, but nobody really understood what it was. And, if you think now, people coming out of concentration camps, if that would be happening now, we would have much more understanding of trauma and post-traumatic stress and, what they went through and how it affects them. But in the 40s and 50s, people didn't really have that understanding. And it was very much just, get on with it, pull up your socks and build a new life and don't look back kind of thing. And many people who grew up with parents who've been survivors, they didn't talk about their experiences. If you recall, people started to talk about their experiences in the 70s and 80s when there started to be a bit of revisionism, and people like Stephen Schilberg got the message out there that you have to talk about your experiences, you have to document it. But initially, I think the first decade or two, if anyone was around, you might remember this. I wasn't around, but my understanding is the first couple of decades after the war, it was very much you didn't talk about it, and you just got on with it, basically. I once had a guy in Cardiff call me up. I don't remember his name now. Gerald something, non-Jewish gentleman. He had some pictures. He'd been one of the first soldiers in Belsen after the war, and he had some incredible pictures, and he wanted to share them. I made a big mistake at the time. I basically found a journalist at the local newspaper, and they ran the story. I should have taken it to a Jewish paper and made more of it as an educational opportunity. I was younger those days. So they ran the story, but they didn't really run it with it. I would have run it with a Jewish angle, but they didn't. But anyway, they're incredible pictures of the first. He said it was incredibly traumatic being one of the first people to enter Belsen. If anyone remembers Reverend Hartman, do you remember Reverend Hartman? He was the Ajax chaplain. He was the rabbi in Hendon United, Riley Close. Leslie Hartman. Anyone remember him?
No.
So he was one of the first soldiers, also British soldiers, I think, in one of the camps. He spoke about it a lot.
I knew someone who was one of the first British soldiers in Auschwitz.
Right, and if the soldiers were,
I think Lorraine's Debbie. I think Lorraine's dad.
Lorraine's dad was one of the first
right,
people in
Right.
Belsen. He was a
Yeah.
doctor.
right,
Yeah.
and if they were traumatized by what they saw, imagine what it was like for those who actually lived through the camps. Apparently, Henry Kissinger wrote about this. He entered the camps, right? The famous Secretary of State later on, and he said it was a life-changing sight, and that was just the experience of somebody entering it and seeing so much death and suffering. Imagine what it was like for a survivor. And yet, people came through the war. They didn't talk about the past. A lot of people whose parents were survivors often say, their parents struggled to show them affection or, different things. There was a chap called Reb Mendel Futterfass who had been in the Russian prisons for like 30 years or something. Spent his last days in Stamford Hill, and they said to the very last, sort of his last weeks, he would come into shore and he'd say, "Shh, KGB are listening," and he was completely paranoid. He'd be looking around everywhere. These things have an impact on you. But so nowadays we'd say you have to look at the past and you have to, unravel, unpack, whatever you call it, the past, and understand the past in order to move on. And some we definitely understand. But at the same time, the idea of moving on is very important, right? People get stuck in their trauma, right? I'm sure you might have met someone. I always remember a chap I met. It was an LD gentleman who hadn't been to shul for like 40 years. Why hadn't he been to shul for 40 years? Because when his sister had died 40 years earlier, he'd asked the then, I don't know, the gabbai or the president or somebody in the shul, could they help get a minyan? And they didn't manage to get a minyan. And he was so upset by this that he was still a member for burial, but he never ever came shul again. And it was really sad. I met him in his old age. He'd been a head teacher. He wasn't married. I think he had nieces and nephews. He was very lonely. And I said to him, "Why don't you come back to shul?" I said, "All the people you're talking about that you harbor this resentment for, they've all died anyway. They're not even around anymore." And he had this resentment, which he couldn't let go of. There was that I don't remember the name of the boy, Anthony in Liverpool, that was murdered. A young lad.
No, that's
James Bulger.
No. More recently, I don't remember. It doesn't matter. He was a young, don't know what you're allowed to say nowadays, lad from the black community. One second. Let me just see. It doesn't matter. I can't think of the name. Out of respect, I'd like to know the name. What was his name? Anthony Walker. Yeah, Anthony Walker. He was Jamaican. Yeah. He was murdered. And it was a racist murder, they said afterwards. It was when was it? 2005. Maybe it's a different one. I think it was more recent. Anyway, I think maybe it was Anthony Walker. And his mother was a religious Christian. She said she forgave the killers. People say, how can you forgive them? Right? And my understanding is, and Judaism would say the same thing, it's not you forgive them because you're okay with what they did. It's that you have to, for your own sanity, you have to move on. And you can't move on if you've still got this resentment and this bitterness. It's not going to bring your child back. And some people stay that way, understandably so. People stay that way for years after trauma or bereavement, and other people pick themselves up. So the Torah tells us Avram, he mourned for Sarah, he cried for her, and then he picked himself up and he carried on. It's a very important lesson. There are two people who looked back. basically looked backwards. Whoops, I don't know what just happened there. It's weird. 1 second. There are 2 people we're told who looked back. Oh,
Lot's
no idea.
Lot's wife.
Lot's wife.
Sorry, 1 second. I don't know what just happened. This is very weird. Okay, don't know what that was. Right, are we still on? Yes. Hello? Okay. There were 2 people who kind of looked backwards and didn't look forwards in different ways. One is Noah, right? What did Noah do after this whole business of, saving the world? What's the first thing he does?
Plants vine.
Gets the dog, gets drunk.
Gets drunk, right? There is a discussion as to whether he knew he was going to get drunk or not. There's a discussion, by the way, with Cain and Abel as to how the whole thing happened. And one of the commentaries says that since there'd not been any murder in history, it's possible Cain didn't know what he was doing. Maybe he just, kicked his brother in the head or something, thinking he was just annoyed with him, or, he didn't realize how that you can kill a person. So I don't know if Noah, I don't remember what the Mephoshim say about Noah, whether he knew what was going to happen. But basically, what's the first thing he does is he drowns his sorrows, right? The world's been destroyed. He's got this big responsibility now to rebuild it with his family. And the first thing he does is gets drunk and basically loses himself. He loses the plot, right? He can't cope. Instead of looking forwards and saying, okay, the world's been saved, time to move on, new generation, he gets stuck on this sort of misery. And the other one, of course, who else looked back last week?
Wife.
Lot's wife.
Lot's wife, right? She turns into a pillar of salt. She's, again, overwhelmed with shock and grief. She can't move on. But she looks at the fire and brimstone. We didn't read this. Sorry, let's read it. Who wants to read about Noah? Go on. Sally, you haven't read yet. Are you on?
We've only got source 4. Abraham was now old, advanced in years.
Oh, that's strange. Oh, sorry, it paused. Sorry, 1 second.
Actually, we have got the other bit, but it's very tiny.
Right, 1 second. Let's go back. Okay.
Yeah,
That's source. This is source 5. We just had. Sorry, it paused for some reason. Have you now got source 5? This is what we just read.
No,
Yeah.
only source 3.
Oh, maybe yours has paused. Has everyone else got a source 5?
I have.
Five.
No. Okay, let me try again. 1 second. Let's do a new share. Here. How's that? Have you got that now?
No.
No, I've gone back to source 4.
Yes.
Abraham old.
Everyone got number 4?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, number 5.
I didn't know.
Right, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're back on. So we did read this one. This is what led to discussion just now. Right. So we said, right, Abram mourned for Sarah. He wailed about her, and then he rose. He got up. Right. He got up from Shiva. He moved on. He quite literally moved on. Picked himself up. That was what I just said. Right. Next source is Noah. So let's read about Noah. Who wants to read about Noah? Just for probably all remember. Sally, please.
Noah, the tiller of soil, was the first to plant a vineyard. He drank the wine and became drunk and uncovered himself within his tent.
Right, and it all got very messy, if you recall. There's different versions of what his son did to him. But this is the guy who's just saved the whole planet, right? And he basically goes on a bender. Right? Why? Because I presume he couldn't cope. It was too much, just everything. Right? Instead of looking forwards, he looks backwards. He looks at everything that's happened and he's just like, he can't cope. Lot's wife, why did she turn into a pillar of salt? It means different things, but why was she so completely, basically traumatized that she just, disintegrated quite literally? Because she looked back. What did she see when she looked back? She saw the fire and brimstone, the anger of God. Right? Lot's wife looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. So looking back is not always a good idea. So you've got Noah, who instead of moving on and rebuilding the world, basically loses himself. You've got Lot's wife, who looks back rather than looking forward, despite being told not to. And you've got Abram, who mourns for Sarah, yes. But the first thing he does after that is he starts building the future. He buys some land and he sets out to find a wife for Yitzchak, because that's what Sarah would have wanted also, right? That this is, there's certain phrases that, you get away with it if you say, it's what he would have wanted, right? It's very hard to argue with that. People say to me, we're not going to do a Shiva, Rabbi, because, father wasn't didn't like sad things. It's what he would have wanted, Rabbi. It's very hard to argue with someone who says it's what he would have wanted, unless you know otherwise. Right? So it's what Sarah would have wanted, but it is, right? So Avram picks himself up and he moves on. Sarah's died, Isaac's not married, he doesn't have any land, he doesn't have any grandchildren, right? Noah would have gone and got drunk, right? Lot's wife would have looked back in anger or anguish. Avram says to himself, a very important point here, which is basically, it's up to me to do something now, right? I want to realize these blessings. I got to pull my socks up. I got to do something. This is the idea of hishtadlus. This is the idea you don't wait for God to just do something for you miraculously. You have to do something yourself. Avram does it. He gets on with it. He creates the future.
Maybe Sarah would have said to him, maybe that's what she would have expected.
Right.
You've got to live your life and look after the boy. So
Yeah.
no messing around.
Right? And the very fact also, being a survivor, he's the survivor, Sarah's not, right? There's a whole thing about survivor guilt now they talk about, right? But by and large, nothing's accidental. He survived for a reason, and he's still got work to do. He might be 137. Those days, that wasn't so old. He goes on to live till 175. So, yeah, it's this is very profound that he doesn't look back. He looks forwards. He's lost his wife. He mourns her. He eulogizes her. He cries for her, as one should. And he then, at the end of Shiva, as it were, he gets up from Shiva. He picks himself up. It's a very important lesson. Right? I'm not saying that the way they did things in the 40s and 50s, where they said basically don't talk about your trauma, is the answer. Right? That a lot of people ultimately probably had long-term damage from that. All kinds of things. Right? Soldiers come back from war told not to talk about what they saw. No, that's not the answer. But at the same time, you can't live in the past either. I had a very interesting session. I don't know if anyone knows Dr. Fahim. Dr. Fahim is the local imam. He was actually invited by Rabbi Mervis when he was at Kinlos to come and speak at Kinlos, the first imam to ever speak at Kinlos. So he's originally from Egypt. He's very modern. He's like modern Orthodox, basically, whatever the equivalent is. I think he wears a suit and tie. He's clean shaven. Don't think he wears basically, he's like a kind of modern, very, very moderate, very sensible person. Very, very nice chap, actually. And I was at an interfaith thing, and he said, I grew up in Egypt. He said, we were at war with Israel. He said, I fought in the Egyptian army against Israelis. He says, and now I'm an advocate for peace. Because basically, he said, I'm a realist. Said things change. You can't get stuck in the past. In the Middle East, by the way, a lot of people do get stuck in the past. It's really interesting. You see what's going on in the Middle East. You have countries that are moving forward with peace with Israel, which is proving to be very, very fruitful. And then you have primarily the Palestinians who clearly can't do that. And they're stuck in this time warp. And unfortunately, nothing changes, So what happens when you get stuck in the past? You have to look to the future. Anyway, today, I should have said at the beginning, is, of course, Rabbi Sachs's second Yahrzeit, which I think might be why Michael's in England, possibly, right, Pam? He's got a program for that. That's Harav Yaakov Tzvi Ben David Aryeh, second Yahrzeit today. So we're learning his teachings. So we'll conclude with his quote from his book, Future Tense. I actually have this book, and my parents got it from him, and he wrote a beautiful inscription, which I was going to take a picture of, but I didn't get a chance. So let's read Rabbi Sachs. I'll read Rabbi Sachs. Okay. So he says, we're not... Go on, you read. Go on. Yeah. It's 2 pages.
What you were going to read. Okay.
No, you go for it. Yeah.
Yes. We are not here by accident. We are here because God wants us to be, and because of the task that we are meant to fulfill. Discovering what that is not easy, and often takes many years of false starts. But for each of us, there is something of God's calling on us to do. A future is not yet made and awaits our making. It is a future-oriented and defined Judaism as a faith.
Okay.
Oh, well.
Yep.
Shall I carry on?
Yeah.
So much of anger, hatred, and resentments of this world are brought about by people obsessed by the past and who, like Lot's wife, are unable to move on. There is no good ending to this kind of story, only more tears and more tragedy. The way of Abraham and Chaye Soro is different. First, build the future. Only then can you mourn the past.
right? Very wise words. So
Oh,
many people get caught up, like we said, like Lot's wife, they look back, or like Noah, they just drown their sorrows. And people get caught up in their trauma. But years later, they'll still be telling you about how wrong they were and how terrible it was. But you can't do that. You have to grieve in whatever way for whatever thing you have to grieve. And grieving is not just for people's physical passing. There's all kinds of things that we grieve for in life. But then you have to move on. You have to find something positive from it. You have to pick yourself up. Very wise words. And that's what we see from Chaye Soro. The first thing Abraham does is to build. Very wise words from Rabbi Sachs. Right. Any questions? Oh, we've got a good crowd today. Right. First time I've seen everyone on screen.
sorry, we had trouble with our microphone that we kept on logging off and logging on again.
All right. We didn't hear you. It's okay.
No.
How are you, Sally?
Yes.
Right. Let me start. I'll stop recording. 1 second. Don't need to record all the chit chat. Right.
I'm better than I was, thank you.
Good.
You're moving your